Great leaders have high expectations of all of their students. But the question is how to get every student to match your expectations, to meet your expectations with that level of the required level of effort in order to produce the results that match your expectations. You see, you have high expectations of your students. Your students should have high expectations of themselves. And as a result, what this does is in times of struggle, in times of stagnation, when the only way forward for your student is to take a risk, and it can work out one or two ways. Either you succeed or you learn. You need your students to have those high expectations, because eventually that's going to cause them to move forward, to take that risk, to try to problem solve in your absence. When you've gone off to help another student and you're going to be a little while, you need all of your students to have those high expectations of themselves, so that they can do what they can until you're able to get to them. You've joined us in a series where we're talking about how to help students increase their self expectations. And this is part 2 of that series. And in the last episode, we talked about one way to help improve student self-expectation, and that was self-talk. So I encourage you to check out that episode of The Marvin Bird Show. I'm your host, Marvin Bird. Here we believe that teachers are leaders, and so here we share ideas and different things to help teachers equip them with the skills and information that they need to lead their students to success. So today we're going to give another tip to help students increase their self expectations, to help increase their expected outcome. Now, again, we don't want just high expectations for the sake of having high expectations of the students. We want them to have high self expectations because of the effort that they are able to put in. And what this does is it gets them on a winning streak. It increases their self-efficacy, which that is something that we really want. Because what can happen is once they come up against an obstacle, they can, in their mind, they can remember what they did a month ago to overcome an obstacle, the work that they put in, and that's going to increase their confidence, and their self expectations are going to remain high because they know what they did a month ago. They know what they did 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago. They know that they have the skills in order to meet the demands of this challenge. Another way that you can help students improve their self-expectations is by helping them shift their self-image. Once again, helping them shift their self-image. Now, when we talk about self-image, we're talking about the mental picture that a person has of themselves. Everybody has a self-image. Everybody has inside of them, they have that mental picture of the way that they see themselves. And it is shaped by a number of things. This picture is shaped by, it could be shaped by the beliefs that a person has about themselves. It could also be shaped by the environment. And, definitely with children, it's also shaped by what others say. And that's why it's so important that us as teachers, as schools, we do a great job in terms of character education, in terms of community building, because you can praise students all the day long, but for some students and some, depending on where they are in life and in their confidence, if they see, a Snapchat, a text message or something like that from their peers, it can it can really be detrimental in terms of their self-image. And that's why that work in terms of community building, character education, it's so important, because those things kind of go into students shaping their self-image. Those things factor into that mental picture. But what you want is, when we're talking about helping students improve their expectations, raise their expectations of themselves, this is important. This is important. And this is why we do this work. This is why we have this podcast here, because it takes a leader. It takes a leader to dig into these things, to do the research and learn about things that they can do to influence the student decision making in their classroom, so that they can bring about success. And this is part of it. When we talk about teaching the whole student, this is part of it. I know life would be so easy if all you had to do was execute your lesson plan, but it's so more than that. So again, when we talk about what goes into that self-image, that mental picture, I've given you just 3 things that go into shaping it. I want you to focus on the beliefs of a person's belief about themselves, their environment, and what others say. Now, we do this often. You know, as teachers, we dabble in this area in terms of shifting self-image, because it can be as small as, some of you out there who are listening, you call your students, you call them scholars, and you call them scholars. And the purpose of that is to shift that self-image. It's to shift that self-image. Scholar, this is another word for, it's another word for student, but it sounds sophisticated. It conveys, I think it also conveys a level of expectation. Like when you put that title on someone of scholar, it just has a nice sound, and it conveys expectations. So it can be as simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. It can be as simple as that. And you know, as I said before, this is so important, but it's because it's closely related to that self-worth. And so energy put into this, energy and time devoted towards shifting that self-image is time well invested. Now let's talk about ways to help students improve their self-image. But before we get to that, what I want to do is I want to talk about my new book. It's coming out soon, and very soon. And the title of that book, are you ready? The title of that book is Teachers Are Leaders. Teachers Are Leaders. So that book is coming out soon. Please stay tuned, to this podcast. Check the website, marvinbird.com, for more details. But that book is coming out soon, and I will let you know when it's available for pre-order. But I'm very, very, very excited about that book. I promise you, it's gonna add a lot of value. It's gonna help a lot of people to lead their students to success. I'm looking forward to it. So excited. So one of the things that you can do to help your students shift their self-image is by having one-on-ones with your students. Now, I know many of you probably already do this with your students, but it really is important to be consistent. And when I was in the classroom, I had a student desk next to my desk, because that's how often I would, have my students do group work or independent work, and then make time to call students up individually to have one-on-one conversations. And during these conversations, we could have been doing a number of things. We could have been setting goals. We could have been talking about, hey, how was your weekend? What's going on? How are you feeling? And it could just be, hey, let's talk about your grades. I notice this is going on. Is there anything that I can do to help? having those one-on-ones with students, there is so much value in having those one-on-ones with students. I actually remember I had a lot of students, they look forward to coming up to my desk and having those one-on-one conversations with me. That's because I was consistent with it, and it wasn't always about grades. Students, they know how they're doing, especially students who are not doing well, they already know. And a lot of instances, they were harder on themselves, and they would be surprised that I would start with praise and start by pointing out the positive things. And so they, at that point, they had a low self image, and their expectations were low. And so my job in that conversation was to raise those expectations by helping to build their confidence, not by piling on and saying, hey, you're missing this, and this. No, just start with some positive things, or maybe not even address the grades at all, because they know what they need to do. Maybe it was just a little bump in the road, and they know what they need to do. Maybe they just need just a little bit of encouragement. But again, it takes leadership in knowing your students, knowing who they are, knowing where they are in terms of responding to feedback. So it's so much deeper. It's so much deeper. It takes knowing your students and how they are going to respond when we talk about these one-on-one conversations. Okay, so I want to share this article with you about one-on-one conferences with students. The title of the article is Empower Students Through Individual Conferences, and it's written by Donna Shrum. Donna, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thank you so much for writing a wonderful article. So she's given us a few tips on how on the benefits of one-on-one conferences, and I just want to go through maybe the first three here with you. So one, students through one-on-one conferences with students learn how to expect more of themselves. That's what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what we want. That's what we want. It goes on to say here in his 1978 book, Mind in Society, the development of higher psychological process, a name I can't pronounce, observed that children grow into the intellectual life around them, but some don't yet have the confidence in their abilities or growth mindset. Again, those are things that we've been touching on: confidence, growth mindset, ability. All of those need to be high in order to have high expectations of oneself. Discussing where they are and how to get where they need to be produces emotionally and relationally healthy learning communities, intellectual environments that produce not mere technical competence, but caring, secure, actively literate human beings. Those conversations with you, they can be so fruitful, so beneficial for students, and so ultimately so helpful in shifting that self-image to the positive side. Let's go on. Let's see what else they have here. All right, number two, the teacher and student constantly renegotiate the teaching learning process and connect each step to larger learning goals, always just beyond their current comfort level. And it speaks to what I said before. It's not about having high expectations just for the sake of having high expectations. No, the student has to do stuff. They have to show growth. They have to take steps. It's got to be the confidence and the high expectations. It's got to be rooted in something that they can point back to, something in their history that they can point back to and build their confidence on, which is going to lead to those high expectations. All right, so let's move on a little bit. See that third one, students receive constant, timely feedback and clarification that makes the student the lead learner. Now, one of the things that I tell students is this: when it comes to feedback gives us the opportunity to try again with better information. Let me repeat that. Feedback gives us the opportunity to try again with better information. Like, really, feedback is something that should be celebrated. Now, there's going to be times when you need to help your students learn how to receive feedback, because, sometimes some students, they just, if it's not perfect, then it's a problem, and that's just something that you're going to have to work with your students. Again, you thought that you were just executing a lesson plan. No, it's so much more than that. Teachers are leaders, and because we're leaders, we have to look at every aspect of running a classroom, of leading people, of managing people, of influencing people, and doing whatever you can as a leader to affect the environment so that students make good decisions, so that students are achieving. All students are achieving. So those are just 3 tips from this article. Again, I will share this out with you in the description section. But ultimately, yes, those one-on-one conferences are so important. And ultimately, what you want to happen is going back to that third point, is you want the student to be the one leading the conversation, the student doing most of the talking, the student doing the reflecting, the student looking at the details, looking at the data, looking at what has happened, looking at their past decision making, their past performance, and going through that information and ultimately interpreting it with you as their guide, and then creating new action steps, new goals as a result of it. Again, with you as the guide, but you're leading the effort. You are leading the effort by sitting back and letting the student take ownership of their learning. It's such a beautiful thing. Here's a tip when we talk about having these one-on-one conversations with students. You want to focus on observations. You want to focus on observations, no judgment, because ultimately what you want to happen in this one-on-one conversation with students is you want the student to see it for themselves. You want to guide the student to see the adjustments they need to make. Now, definitely, if their talking is negative, if they're saying things like, "Oh, I've never been good at social studies," you have to step in and correct that. We talked about that in the previous episode. Self-talk is so important. You can't have high expectations of yourself if you're saying negative things. If your talk is negative, because in a way you're just limiting your capacity to do more with your words. So you've got to step in this one-on-one conversation and correct that talk with students. But largely, you're focused on observations. You're trying to get the student to see the adjustments that they need to make. You're trying to get the student to make a mental investment in setting this plan and creating this plan, and creating the action steps. Once they've created a plan, once they've set a goal, you want the students to get it themselves. And what this does largely is it helps the students to put down their guard. It helps the students to put down their guard, because ultimately what you're trying to do, is it said in the article, which again I'm going to share with you, it helps to make the student the lead learner. Because ultimately what you would like is, you would like for the student to do more of the talking. They're the ones sitting there, they're doing the reflection, they're thinking through the process, they're thinking through their their actions that they've taken. They're thinking through, some of the results, the actions that they need to take in the future, maybe a little bit of adjustment here or there. They're coming up with all of that. That's what you ultimately want, because that's going to improve their self-efficacy. That's going to improve their belief in themselves. So in the next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit deeper into these one-on-one conferences. I'm going to give you some templates that you can use, and as you plan your time with students, so that time is focused, it's beneficial, and ultimately it's going to help students increase their expectations of themselves. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch. And until we meet again, please don't forget that teachers are leaders.